Sienna God, hello all. Oshisahiya, good evening, and Wado, thank you for watching. This is a day 11, part B of reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an inquiry into values by Robert M. Pirsig. No, now. He looks at me and sees I'm staying. His look is so frightened, I'm about to change my mind, but then suddenly his expression breaks and he turns and runs down the stairs and out the door before I can follow him. The big heavy door closes down below and I'm all alone here now. I listen for some sound. Of whom? Of him? I listened for a long time. The floorboards have an eerie creak as I move down the corridor, and they are accompanied by an eerie thought that it is him. In this place, he is the reality, and I am the ghost. On one of the classroom doorknobs, I see his hand rest for a moment, then slowly turn the knob, then push the door open. The room inside is weighted, exactly as remembered as if he were here now. He is here now. He's aware of everything I see. Everything jumps forth and vibrates with recall. The long dark green chalkboards on either side are flaked and in need of repair, just as they were. The chalk, never any chalk except little stubs in the trough. Did I just skip a page? Or is that written like that? Yeah, just as they are. The chalk, never any chalk. Oh, okay, except little stubs in the trough, is still here. Beyond the blackboard are the windows, and through them are the mountains he watched meditatively on days when the students were writing. He would sit by the radiator with a stub of chalk in one hand and stare out the window at the mountains, interrupted occasionally by a student who asked, "Do we have to do?" And he would turn and answer whatever thing it was, and there was a oneness he had never known before. This was a place where he was received as himself, not as what he could be or should be, but as himself. A place all receptive, listening. He gave everything to it. This wasn't one room, this was 1,000 rooms, changing each day with the storms and snows and patterns of clouds on the mountains, with each class and even with each student. No 2 hours were ever alike, and it was always a mystery to him what the next one would bring. My sense of time has been lost when I hear a creaking of steps in the hall. It becomes louder, then stops at the entrance to the classroom. The knob turns, the door opens, a woman looks in. She has an aggressive face as if she intended to catch someone here. She appears to be in her late 20s. Late 20s is not very pretty. Oh, that's not nice. I thought I saw someone, she says. I thought, she looks puzzled. She comes inside the room and walks toward me. She looks at me more closely. Now the aggressive look vanishes, slowly changing to wonder. She looks astonished. "Oh my God," she says. "Is it you?" I don't recognize her at all. Nothing. She calls my name and I nod. "Yes, it's me. You've come back." I shake my head. "Just for these few minutes." She continues to look until it becomes embarrassing. Now she becomes aware of this herself and asks, "May I sit down for a moment?" The timid way she asks this indicates she may have been a student of his. She sits down on one of the front row chairs. Her hand, which bears no wedding ring, is trembling. I really am a ghost. Now she becomes embarrassed herself. "How long are you staying?" "No, I asked you that." I fill in. "I'm staying with Bob DeWeese for a few days and then heading west. I had some time to spend in town and thought I'd see how the college looked." "Oh," she says. "I'm glad you did. It's changed. We've all changed. So much since you left." There's another embarrassing pause. "We heard you were in the hospital." "Yes," I say. There is more embarrassed silence. That she doesn't pursue it means she probably knows why. She hesitates some more, searches for something to say. This is getting hard to bear. "Where are you teaching?" she finally asks. "I'm not teaching anymore," I say. "I've stopped." She looks incredulous. "You've stopped?" She frowns and looks at me again as if to verify that she is really talking to the right person. "You can't do that." "Yes, you can." She shakes her head in disbelief. "Not you." "Yes." "Why?" "That's all over for me now. I'm doing other things." I keep wondering who she is, and her expression looks equally baffled. But that's just, the sentence drops off. She tries again. "You're just being completely..." But the sentence fails too. The next word is crazy, but she caught herself both times. She realizes something, bites her lip and looks mortified. I'd say something if I could, but there's no place to start. I'm about to tell her I don't know her, but she stands up and says, "I must go now." I think she sees I don't know her. She goes to the door. She says goodbye quickly and perfunctorily. And as it closes, her footsteps go quickly, almost at a run down the hall. The outer door of the building closes, and the classroom is as silent as before, except for a kind of psychic eddy current she has left behind. The room is completely modified by it. Now it contains only the backwash of her presence, and what it was I came here to see has vanished. Good, I think, standing up again. I'm glad to have visited this room, but I don't think I'll ever want to see it again. I'd rather fix motorcycles, and one's waiting. On the way out, I open one more door compulsively. There on the wall, I see something which sends a spine-tingling feeling along my neck. It's a painting. I have no recollection of it, but now I know he bought it and put it there. And suddenly I know it's not a painting, it's a print of a painting he ordered from New York, and which Deweese had frowned at because it was a print, and prints are of art and not art themselves, a distinction he didn't recognize at the time. But the print, Feininger's Church of the Minorities, had an appeal to him that was irrelevant to the art, and that its subject, a kind of Gothic cathedral created from semi-abstract lines and planes and colors and shades, seemed to reflect his mind's vision of the Church of Reason, and that's why he put it here. All this comes back now. This was his office. A find. This is the room I am looking for. I step inside, and an avalanche of memory loosened by the jolt of the print begins to come down. The light on the print comes from a miserable cramped window in the adjacent wall, through which he looked out across the valley onto the Madison Range and watched the storms come in. And while watching this valley before me now, through the window here now, started the whole thing, the whole madness right here. This is the exact spot. And that door leads to Sarah's office. Sarah! Now it comes down. She came trotting by with her watering pot between those two doors, going from the corridor to her office, and she said, I hope you are teaching quality to your students. This is la-di-da sing-song voice of a lady in her final year before retirement, about to water her plants. That was the moment it all started. That was the seed crystal. Seed crystal, a powerful fragment of memory, comes back now. The laboratory, organic chemistry. He was working with an extremely subsaturated solution when something similar had happened. A supersaturated solution is one in which the saturation point at which no more material will dissolve has been exceeded. This can occur because the saturation point becomes higher as the temperature of the solution is decreased. When you dissolve the material at a high temperature and then cool the solution, the material sometimes doesn't crystallize out because the molecules don't know how. They require something to get them started, a seed crystal or a grain of dust or even a sudden scratch or tap on the surrounding glass. He walked to the water tap to cool the solution but never got there. Before his eyes as he walked, he saw a star of crystalline material in the solution appear and then grow suddenly and radiantly until it filled the entire vessel. He saw it grow. Where before was only clear liquid, there was now a mass so solid he could turn the vessel upside down and nothing would come out. The one sentence, I hope you are teaching quality to your students, was said to him, and within a matter of a few months, growing so fast you could almost see it grow, came an enormous, intricate, highly structured mass of thought, formed as if by magic. I don't know what he replied to her when she said this, probably nothing. She would be back and forth behind his chair many times each day to get to and from her office. Sometimes she stopped with a word or two of apology about the interruption, sometimes with a fragment of news, and he was accustomed to this as a part of office life. I know that she came by a second time and asked, are you really teaching quality this quarter? And he nodded and looked back from his chair for a second and said, definitely, and she trotted on. He was working on lecture notes at the time and was in a state of complete depression about them. What was depressing was that the text was one of the most rational texts available on the subject of rhetoric, and it still didn't seem right. Moreover, he had access to the authors who were members of the department. He had asked and listened and talked and agreed with their answers in a rational way, but somehow still wasn't satisfied with them. The text started with the premise that if rhetoric is to be taught at all at a university level, it should be taught as a branch of reason, not as a mystic art. Therefore, it emphasized a mastery of the rational foundations of communication in order to understand rhetoric. Elementary logic was introduced, elementary stimulus response theory was brought in, and from these a progression was made in understanding of how to develop an essay. For the first year of teaching, Phaedrus had been fairly content with this framework. He felt there was something wrong with it. But that wrongness was not in this application of reason to rhetoric. The wrongness was in the old ghost of his dreams, rationality itself. He recognized it as the same wrongness that had been troubling him for years and for which he had no solutions. He just felt that no writer ever learned to write by this squarish, by the numbers, objective, methodical approach. Yet that was all rationality offered, and there was nothing to do about it without being irrational. And if there was one thing he had a clear mandate to do in this Church of Reason, it was to be rational. So he had to let it go at that. A few days later, when Sarah trotted by again, she stopped and said, "I'm so happy you're teaching quality this quarter. Hardly anybody is these days." "Well, I am," he said. "I'm definitely making a point of it." "Good," she said, and trotted on. He returned to his notes, but it wasn't long before thought about them was interrupted by a recall of her strange remark. What the HE double hockey sticks was she talking about? Quality? Of course he was teaching quality. Who wasn't? He continued with the notes. Another thing that depressed him was prescriptive rhetoric, which supposedly had been done away with, but was still around. This was the old slap on the fingers, life, your modifiers were caught dangling stuff. Correct spelling, correct punctuation, correct grammar, hundreds of itsy-bitsy rules for itsy-bitsy people. No one could remember all that stuff and concentrate on what he was trying to write about. It was all table manners, not derived from any sense of kindness or decency or humanity, but originally from an egotistic desire to look like gentlemen and ladies. Gentlemen and ladies had good table manners and spoke and wrote grammatically. It was what identified one with the upper classes. In Montana, however, it didn't have this effect at all. It identified one. Instead, as a stuck-up Eastern ASS, there was a minimum prescriptive rhetoric requirement in the department, but like the other teachers, he scrupulously avoided any defense of prescriptive rhetoric other than as a requirement of the college. Soon the thought interrupted again. Quality? There was something irritating, even angering about the question. He thought about it, and then thought some more, and then looked out the window, and then thought about it some more. Quality? 4 hours later, he still sat there with his feet on the window ledge and stared out into what had become a dark sky. The phone rang, and it was his wife calling to find out what had happened. He told her he would be home soon, but then forgot about this and everything else. It wasn't until 3 o'clock in the morning that he wearily confessed to himself that he didn't have a clue as to what quality was, picked up his briefcase, and headed home. Most people would have forgotten about quality at this point, or just left it hanging suspended because they were getting nowhere and had other things to do. But he was so despondent about his own inability to teach what he believed, he really didn't give a dang about whatever else it was he was supposed to do. And when he woke up the next morning, there was quality staring him in the face. 3 hours of sleep, and he was so tired he knew he wouldn't be up to give it a lecture that day, and besides, his notes had never been completed. So he wrote on the blackboard, write a 350-word essay answering the question, what is quality in thought and statement? Then he sat by the radiator while they wrote and thought about quality himself. At the end of the hour, no one seemed to have finished, so he allowed the students to take their papers home. His class didn't meet again for 2 days, and that gave him some time to think about the question some more too. During that interim, he saw some of the students walking between classes, nodded to them, and got looks of anger and fear in return. He guessed they were having the same trouble he was. Quality. You know what it is, yet you don't know what it is. But that's self-contradictory. But some things are better than others. That is, they have more quality But when you try to say what the quality is, apart from the things that have it, it all goes poof. There's nothing to talk about. But if you can't say what quality is, how do you know what it is? Or how do you know that it even exists? If no one knows what it is, then for all practical purposes, it doesn't exist at all. But for all practical purposes, it really does exist. What else are the grades based on? Exactly. Why else would people pay fortunes for some things and throw others in the trash pile? Obviously, some things are better than others. But what's the betterness? So round and round you go, spinning mental wheels and nowhere finding any place to get traction. What the H-double hockey stick says quality. What is it? Part 3, Chapter 16. Chris and I have had a good night's sleep, and this morning have packed the backpacks carefully and now have been going up the mountainside for about an hour. The forest here at the bottom of the canyon is mostly pine. Ooh, I love pine. With a few aspen and broadleaf shrubs. Steep canyon walls rise way above us on both sides. Occasionally the trail opens into a patch of sunlight and grass that edges the canyon stream, but soon it re-enters the deep shade of the pines. The earth of the trail is covered with a soft, springy duff of pine needles. It is very quiet here. Mountains like these and travelers in the mountains and events that happen to them here are found not only in Zen literature, but in the tales of every major religion. The allegory of a physical mountain for the spiritual one that stands between each soul and its goal is an easy and natural one to make. Like those in the valley behind us, most people stand in sight of spiritual mountains all their lives and never enter them, being content to listen to others who have been there and thus avoid the hardships. Some travel into the mountains accompanied by experienced guides who know the best and least dangerous routes by which they arrive at their destination. Still others, inexperienced and untrusted, attempt to make their own routes. Few of these are successful, but occasionally some, by sheer will and luck and grace, do make it. Once there, they become more aware than any of the others that there's no single or fixed number of routes. There are as many routes as there are individual souls. That's true. I want to talk now about Phaedrus' exploration into the meaning of the term quality, an exploration which he saw as a route through the mountains of the spirit. As best I can puzzle it out, there were two distinct phases. In the first phase, he made no attempt at a rigid, systematic definition of what he was talking about. This was a happy, fulfilling, and creative phase. It lasted most of the time he taught at the school back in the valley behind us. The second phase emerged as a result of normal intellectual criticism of his lack of definition of what he was talking about. In this phase, he made systematic, rigid statements about what quality is and worked out an enormous hierarchic structure of thought to support them. He literally had to move heaven and earth to arrive at the systematic understanding, and when he was done, felt he'd achieved an explanation of existence and our consciousness of it better than any that had existed before. If it was truly a new route over the mountain, it's certainly a needed one. For more than 3 centuries now, the old routes common in this hemisphere have been undercut and almost washed out by the natural erosion and change of the shape of the mountain wrought by scientific truth. The early climbers established paths that were on firm ground with an accessibility that appealed to all. But today, the western routes are all but closed because of the dogmatic inflexibility in the face of change. To doubt the literal meaning of the words of Jesus or Moses incurs hostility from most people. But it's just a fact that if Jesus or Moses were to appear today unidentified with the same message he spoke many years ago, his mental stability would be challenged. Absolutely. This isn't because what Jesus or Moses said was untrue or because modern society is in error, but simply because the route they chose to reveal to others has lost relevance and comprehensibility. Heaven above fades from meaning when space-age consciousness asks, where is above? But the fact that the old roots have tended, because of language rigidity, to lose their everyday meaning and become almost closed doesn't mean that the mountain is no longer there. If there's a will, it's there and will be there as long as consciousness exists. Phaedrus' second metaphysical phase was a total disaster. Before the electrodes were attached to his head, he'd lost everything tangible: money, property, children. Even his rights as a citizen had been taken away from him by order of the court. All he had left was his one crazy lone dream of quality, a map of a route across the mountain for which he had sacrificed everything. Then, after the electrodes were attached, he lost that. And I've gone over time. Don't go hang again, you mean a good till we meet again. Love you, mean it.